If the cost of renting or buying a property is making your head spin, there is a third option you might not have considered: co-op housing. It may not be something you've heard a lot about. That's because it makes up just a fraction of housing in Canada. Most co-ops that exist today were developed in the 1970s and 80s, and the few who live in them love how affordable they are.
I often travel, and people say, well, where do you get the money for traveling? I said, well, I don't have to pay a mortgage.
Waiting lists for co-op units are so long, it can take years to get into one. So if demand for these units is so high, why aren't there more of them? Well, part of that answer is that they tend to need a lot of government support. And the second part is that starting one can be complicated. Let's start with the way housing co-ops work. Members are co-owners and vote on how the building is managed. And as long as you follow the rules, you can stay as long as you want. Generally, housing co-ops are divided into two categories: nonprofit and equity co-ops. In an equity co-op, you buy a share of a building, a share which can gain value over time. But these are far less common than non-profit co-ops. In those, you aren't building equity. You simply pay a monthly fee that covers building expenses and maintenance, and when you leave, your unit goes to someone else. Dimitri Rousopoulos lives in one of those co-ops. He's one of the founders of Canada's largest housing cooperative development, the Milton Park Community. He's lived in this two-story townhouse since 1972, where all 4 residents pay under $1,000 a month. And since the property is co-owned by co-op members, no one has to worry about being evicted or the building being sold.
I have a sense of ownership. I have a sense of security. I feel my personality enriched. I feel healthier in every way, mentally and physically.
How much you save in a co-op compared to the rental or buying market can really depend on the city, province, and structure of the co-op itself. According to the Cooperative Housing Federation of Canada, there are about 95,000 co-op housing units in Canada, most of them individual apartments. So could we start seeing more of these units? That's the hope. Governments are starting to get more involved again, but not to the extent that they were in the past.
So in the 1970s and 80s, there was robust federal and provincial investment in new cooperative housing supply. That investment slowed down due to policy decisions by governments in the 80s and 90s to first cut and then eliminate social housing funding.
The federal government has made some recent investments to build this kind of housing. One example is the recently established Co-op Housing Development Program. It offers loans and contributions to help co-ops get started. And some cities are contributing too. Montreal is now selling land for these projects at break-even prices. The Quebec Confederation for Cooperative Housing says this is a good first start, but it's still a far cry from the government investments of the 70s and 80s. And that, paired with today's higher prices for land and labor, mean that if you're starting a new co-op, your costs up front are going to be a lot more than in an older co-op. And on top of that, it can be a complicated process to set one up. It goes way beyond just creating the co-op entity.
Group of people need to get together, and if they build their own property, they need to find a site and to buy the site, get permit to build, and so on. These are processes that usually are very cumbersome and long.
But the Quebec Co-op Confederation argues it's still worth it. It says that even if the upfront savings aren't as significant for new co-ops as the price of buying and renting goes up, co-op residents will save money in the long term. Still, experts say that these kinds of living arrangements aren't for everyone.
I think that one of the reasons is that we are individualistic in nature. People would like to own their own property, the suburbans. Once they move in, there can be issues with getting along, how to share things, and so on.
The Office of the Federal Housing Minister did not respond to CBC's request for comment in time, but a spokesperson for Quebec's housing ministry told CBC that housing co-ops are an important model in the province's housing supply ecosystem. It adds that funds are available through a variety of programs, including the Quebec Affordable Housing Program. But experts say that if governments are serious about this kind of housing, they need to offer more money or even properties at a lower cost for these projects. Others say the co-op movement also needs to promote itself better so that people see it as a viable option.
this is something that definitely can be very attractive to some who want a hold in the housing market. In other words, it has fantastic potential.